the philosophical insight that explains the perfectionist trap. We live in a world that constantly bombards us with the idea that we must be exceptional, flawless, even. From the moment we are aware of ourselves as individuals, we are conditioned to strive for perfection. Whether it's in school, work, relationships, or personal growth, the message is clear: anything less than perfect is failure. But is that really true? And more importantly, is the pursuit of perfection even attainable? Today we're going to explore one of the most insidious traps that keeps so many people stuck in a cycle of frustration, self-doubt, and procrastination: the perfectionist trap. At first glance, striving for perfection seems like a noble goal. After all, why wouldn't we want to do the best we can? But perfectionism is not about doing your best, it's about an unattainable ideal, an illusion of flawlessness that keeps shifting further away the closer you think you get. It's a mirage in the desert, a trick of the mind that convinces you that you're never quite ready, never quite good enough, never quite done. And so, you hesitate, you delay, you tell yourself that you'll start that project when the conditions are just right. You'll share your work when it's impeccable. You'll take action when you feel completely prepared. But that day never comes.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more topics you love.
Perfectionism masquerades as ambition, but in reality, it is fear in disguise. It is the fear of failure, the fear of judgment, the fear of not being enough. And because perfection is impossible, the perfectionist finds themselves trapped in an endless cycle of planning, revising and second-guessing, never actually moving forward. Think about it. How many dreams have gone unrealized because someone convinced themselves they weren't ready yet? How many brilliant ideas have withered away in notebooks, never shared with the world because their creator feared they weren't perfect enough? And here's the paradox: the people who achieve the most in life are not the ones who wait until everything is perfect. They are the ones who take action despite the imperfections. They write the book even when they doubt their writing skills. They start the business even when they don't have all the answers. They create, they build, they put themselves out there, knowing that mistakes and failures are part of the process. Because here's the truth: perfection is not the prerequisite for success. Action is. But let's take this deeper. Why do we even crave perfection in the first place? Why do we feel this relentless need to be flawless? If we examine it philosophically, perfectionism is rooted in our desire for control. We want to control how others perceive us. We want to control the outcome of our efforts. We want to eliminate uncertainty, to ensure that if we take a risk, it will pay off exactly as we imagine. But life does not work that way. Life is unpredictable, messy, and full of unknowns. No matter how much we plan, we can never control everything. And in our attempt to do so, we end up controlling nothing because we are too paralyzed by the fear of imperfection to take the first step. So, let me ask you, what have you been putting off because you're waiting for the perfect moment? What have you convinced yourself you're not ready for? And here's the most uncomfortable question of all: what if that perfect moment never comes? What if waiting for perfection is the very thing preventing you from ever reaching your full potential? The illusion of perfection, why it's an unreachable standard. Perfection, as we conceive it, is a mirage, an ever-receding horizon that convinces us that just a little more effort, a little more refinement, a little more time will finally bring us to that elusive state of flawlessness. But no matter how much we polish, revise, or prepare, perfection always remains just out of reach. This isn't a coincidence. It's a fundamental truth about the nature of reality itself. The world is not perfect. Nature is not perfect. Even the most exquisite works of art, the most celebrated achievements in human history, contain imperfections. And yet, we convince ourselves that we must somehow transcend this truth, that we must be the exception, that our work, our efforts, our very selves must be flawless before we allow them to be seen. But here's the problem: the closer we get to perfection, the more aware we become of our own flaws. The more we improve, the more we see what still needs improvement. It's an infinite regress, a self-perpetuating cycle where the more we strive, the more we feel inadequate. This is why perfectionism doesn't just slow us down, it actively erodes our confidence. It tricks us into believing that no matter how hard we work, we are still not enough. And when you internalize that belief, you don't just hesitate, you begin to fear action itself. You start to see imperfection as failure rather than as an inherent part of growth. Consider this: some of the greatest thinkers, artists, and innovators in history were not perfectionists, but they were relentless experimenters. Leonardo da Vinci left countless works unfinished, yet he is remembered as a genius. Beethoven's symphonies contain moments of discord, yet they are masterpieces. The most successful entrepreneurs launch businesses that fail before they finally succeed. But if perfection had been their goal, they would have never shared their work, never taken risks, never created anything at all. Because perfection is not the path to greatness, iteration is. The willingness to be imperfect, to start before you feel ready, to refine as you go, is what leads to mastery. And yet, despite all of this, we still cling to the illusion of perfection. Why? Because perfectionism offers us a false sense of security. It makes us believe that if we just get everything right, we can avoid criticism, rejection, and failure. But in doing so, we trade real progress for the illusion of control. We convince ourselves that we are protecting ourselves from failure, when in reality, we are simply ensuring that we never succeed. Because the only true failure is inaction. The only real mistake is never trying at all. So ask yourself, how much of your life have you spent trapped in this illusion? How many opportunities have you missed because you were waiting to be perfect? What if, instead of striving for perfection, you embraced imperfection as the price of growth? What if you accepted that the first draft will always be messy, that the first attempt will always be flawed, that mastery is not something you achieve before you begin, but something you develop through the process of doing? And here's the most radical idea of all: what if perfection isn't even desirable? What if the very thing we fear, imperfection, is what makes life meaningful? Think about the most beautiful moments in your life. Were they perfect? Or were they raw, unfiltered, unpredictable? Think about the people you love. Do you love them because they are flawless, or because their imperfections make them real, human, and unique? Could it be that the very thing we are trying to eliminate, imperfection, is actually the source of everything that makes life rich and worthwhile? To let go of perfectionism is not to lower your standards, it is to free yourself from an impossible burden. It is to recognize that the pursuit of excellence is not the same as the pursuit of perfection. Excellence allows for mistakes, for learning, for growth. Perfection does not. And the irony is, those who embrace imperfection often achieve far more than those who chase perfection, because they are willing to take action, to learn from failure, and to refine their craft through experience rather than endless hesitation. So now the question is, will you continue to chase an illusion, Or will you allow yourself to create, to act, to live imperfectly but fully? Breaking free. How to escape the perfectionist trap and take action. Understanding the illusion of perfection is one thing, but breaking free from its grip is another. It's not enough to simply recognize that perfection is unattainable. We must actively rewire our minds to move forward despite imperfection. The perfectionist trap is powerful because it feeds on our deepest fears: the fear of failure, the fear of judgment, the fear of not being enough. And so, if we want to escape it, we must confront these fears head-on. The first step is to redefine failure. Perfectionists see failure as a verdict, a permanent stain that proves their inadequacy. But failure is not an end, it is a process, a teacher, a necessary step in any meaningful pursuit. Every great artist, entrepreneur, scientist, and thinker has failed more times than they can count. The difference is, they did not let failure stop them. They understood that failure is simply information, a signal that something needs to be adjusted, refined, improved. In fact, failure is often the very thing that leads to success because it reveals what doesn't work, forcing us to find what does. If you can shift your mindset to see failure as a tool rather than a threat, you will begin to move forward in ways you never imagined. But it's not just about failure, it's about action. Perfectionism thrives in inaction. It convinces us that we must wait until we are fully ready, fully prepared, fully confident before we begin. But the truth is, confidence does not come before action, it comes from action. The musician does not wait to feel like a master before they pick up an instrument. The writer does not wait for the perfect sentence before they start typing. But the entrepreneur does not wait for absolute certainty before launching a business. They act first, and confidence follows. You do not become ready by waiting, you become ready by doing. One of the most powerful ways to break free from perfectionism is to embrace the concept of iteration. Instead of aiming for a perfect result, aim for a first draft, a rough version, an experiment. Instead of asking yourself, "How can I make this perfect?" ask, "How can I get started?" This simple shift changes everything. It removes the pressure of perfection and replaces it with the freedom to create, to test, to improve. And as you take action, something incredible happens. You realize that imperfection is not a failure, it is the path to mastery. The best painters paint bad paintings before they create masterpieces. The best athletes lose games before they win championships. The best speakers give awkward speeches before they inspire crowds. The only way to achieve excellence is to endure imperfection along the way. And here is where the real transformation happens. Once you start taking action, you begin to see progress. And progress, no matter how small, is the antidote to perfectionism. Because perfectionism tells you that you are not good enough, that you are stuck, that you must wait. But progress proves otherwise. Progress shows you that you are capable of growth, that you are moving forward, that you are learning. And the more you see progress, the less power perfectionism has over you. But let's go even deeper. What if the very act of embracing imperfection is what makes life meaningful? Think about it, what would a perfect life even look like? A life with no mistakes, no failures, no struggles. It might sound appealing at first, but if you really consider it, you will see the flaw in the idea. Without imperfection, there is no growth. Without struggle, there is no triumph. Without uncertainty, there is no adventure. The very things we try to avoid, mistakes, setbacks, challenges, are often the things that shape us, that make us stronger, wiser, more alive? Could it be that the imperfections in our journey are not obstacles, but the very essence of what makes life worth living? So ask yourself, what have you been avoiding because you are afraid it won't be perfect? What would happen if you let go of that fear? If you took action despite the imperfection? What if, instead of seeing mistakes as proof of failure, you saw them as evidence that you are truly living, truly growing? Because in the end, it is not perfection that leads to fulfillment, it is progress. It is the willingness to step into the unknown, to create without certainty, to act despite fear. It is the realization that life is not about being flawless, it is about being engaged, about learning, about moving forward. So now, the real challenge begins. Will you continue to wait for the perfect moment, or will you take the first imperfect step? The courage to be imperfect, living a life of growth and action there, is a rare and powerful kind of freedom that comes when you finally accept that you will never be perfect. It is the freedom to create without hesitation, to act without fear, to live without constantly measuring yourself against an impossible standard. Perfectionism is a prison, but the door has never been locked. But the moment you decide to walk through it, to embrace imperfection as an essential part of your journey, you begin to experience life in a way that most people never will. You begin to move forward, not because you are flawless, but because you are willing to grow. And this is where the real transformation happens. When you embrace imperfection, you stop seeing life as a series of tests you must pass and start seeing it as a process of becoming. You realize that every mistake, every setback, every awkward first attempt is not a reflection of your inadequacy, but a necessary step toward mastery. The greatest minds in history did not succeed because they were perfect, they succeeded because they kept going. They learned, they adapted, they improved. They understood that the pursuit of perfection is the enemy of progress, and they chose progress instead. But this choice requires courage, because when you let go of perfectionism, you also let go of the illusion of certainty. You stop waiting for guarantees, for absolute confidence, for the promise that everything will turn out exactly as you hope. You step into the unknown, knowing that failure is possible, that rejection is possible, that imperfection is inevitable. And yet, you move forward anyway. This is what separates those who achieve their dreams from those who remain stuck in hesitation. Not intelligence, not talent, not luck, but the willingness to act despite the uncertainty, despite the fear, despite the imperfections that will inevitably arise. And here's the paradox. The people who are willing to be imperfect often accomplish far more than the people who wait for perfection. The writer who publishes an imperfect book reaches more people than the writer who spends decades rewriting the first chapter. The entrepreneur who launches a flawed business learns more than the one who waits until everything is perfect. The person who stumbles through their first attempts at anything, public speaking, painting, learning a new skill, will always grow faster than the person who refuses to begin until they feel completely ready. Because perfect never comes. It is an illusion, a moving target that keeps shifting further away the closer you think you get. And the sooner you stop chasing it, the sooner you can start building something real. So, ask yourself, what have you been holding back because you're afraid it won't be good enough? What have you convinced yourself you're not ready for? What opportunities have you let slip away because you were waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect skill level, the perfect plan? And now, the most important question of all: what would happen if you stopped waiting? What would happen if, instead of aiming for perfection, you aimed for progress. Because the truth is, life does not reward those who wait for perfection. It rewards those who show up, who try, who take risks, who are willing to fail and learn and try again. The most successful people in the world are not the ones who never make mistakes, they are the ones who refuse to let mistakes stop them. They are the ones who understand that imperfection is not a flaw, but a feature of growth. They are the ones who choose to live fully rather than cautiously, who choose to create rather than critique, who choose to act rather than hesitate. And this is the choice before you now. You can continue to chase an illusion, to hold yourself back in the name of perfection, to wait for a moment that will never come. Or you can take the first step, no matter how imperfect it may be. You can write the first sentence, start the first project, take the first risk. You can embrace the discomfort of imperfection, knowing that it is the price of progress, the path to mastery, the gateway to everything you have ever wanted to achieve. Because at the end of your life, you will not regret the things you tried and failed at nearly as much as the things you never tried at all. You will not look back and wish you had been perfect, you will wish you had been bold. You will wish you had spoken up, taken action, shown the world what you had to offer. And the only way to ensure that you do not carry that regret is to start now. Not when you are ready, not when you are perfect, but now, in all of your glorious imperfection, with all of your doubts and fears and uncertainties. Now, because now is all you ever have. So what will you do? Will you keep waiting, or will you have the courage to be imperfect? Because the moment you choose imperfection over hesitation, progress over perfection, action over fear, that is the moment your life truly begins,